think your union has your back, think again. Today we are looking at how lazy copy and paste recognition agreements turned a legal strike into a workplace trap. Next on his Chaile time.
Chaile time.
Welcome to this week's edition of It is Chaile Time, and today the title is Signed, Sealed and Silenced: How Trade Unions Fail the Fine Print. The entire motivation for this podcast emanated from my recent experience with one of the major trade unions in South Africa. So we are going to look at what transpired. It's a union that is trying to seek organizational rights at one of my clients, and all the processes that emanated from that up to the point where a recognition agreement was signed to their detriment, and only afterwards realizing that, hey, listen, this is gonna bleed membership in our workplace. So the audience for today, who is this, the intended audience for this podcast, specifically for, obviously it's always for everybody operating in the labor space, where you're an owner of the business or an HR manager, but specifically this podcast is aimed towards trade union officials, shop stewards, and HR managers that deals with employment law in the workplace, specifically dealing with trade union negotiations and so on and so forth. Workplace negligence caused by trade unions can be very costly to both employees in terms of the collective bargaining process, in which they try to collectively bargain with the employer for enhanced conditions of employment, maybe the creation of benefits, and maybe also increased wages. But workplace negligence caused by trade unions, it also become very costly for trade unions themselves in terms of bleeding membership. And this is a trend I have seen over many years, where negligence of trade union officials caused members to resign from the union. Okay, so we are going to go through an article, a very interesting News 24 article that actually gives a bit of a snapshot in terms of the trade union movement in South Africa. And we're also going to go through some statute legislation just to explain a bit, give you a bit of a legal context in terms of organizational rights, the value of a recognition agreement, and then I'm going to explain this whole situation that happened to one of my clients and how this is now creating chaos in the workplace. But specifically, when I say chaos in the workplace, I don't mean necessarily from a logistics or operational perspective. I'm speaking from a perspective of the relationship between the trade union and their members, and how their own negligence, the union, is now to the detriment of their own employees, and employees starting to leave the union movement. But okay, before we continue, as you know already, we have the Harmony People Network conference coming up at the luxurious Kiewitzkroon on the 10th of September this year. And we are going to introduce one of our keynote speakers today. She's a people strategist, Melissa Subban from Happy Factory, and she will be talking about beyond automation, the human skills that will define the AI workplace. Now remember, the title of this year's conference is From Good to Great, and we are looking specifically at the AI revolution that's hitting the world, that's hitting the workplace, and to prepare HR professionals and business owners for what is coming next.
What's your edge in this AI world? I'm Melissa Subban, a people strategist and change manager. And this 10th of September at the HPN conference, I'll be talking to you about what your human edge is in this AI world. And we'll be covering a bunch of skills, topics around how you can take your people to the next level. So join me on the 10th of September at the HPN conference. Don't miss out.
Okay, so the death of unionism and the rise of corporate greed. Look at this article from News 24. The death of unionism and the rise of corporate greed. Let's go through this article quickly. Gone are the days when trade unions used May Day, which is now called Workers' Day, to demonstrate their annual gains advancing workers' rights. In 26, the labor movement is all but dead, with just a few pockets of organizing still taking place annually to help workers negotiate better salaries and improve their working conditions. Workers today only rely on the labor laws of this country for fairness and equality in the workplace. Activism in the mining sector has been waning rapidly, with constant job cuts hollowing out the industry and strangling the participation of unions. The once mighty COSATU used to make employers shiver, and as one of the still dominant unions in the labor landscape, it has also seen an influence dramatically diminished in the past 10 years. Various studies showed now and put union membership at less than 25% in the total workforce, down from 34% a decade ago. So there's a bit of a decline in unionization in the workplace, the South African workplace. It is said that for decent work conditions to be achieved in any workplace, a unionized workforce is needed for a dynamic and mutually beneficial relationship between employers and employees. A work culture without unions also creates a policy vacuum, as unions have historically prioritized the importance of workers to be involved in policies that are aimed at improving their working conditions, securing their rights, and ensuring decent remuneration. South African unions have to ask themselves why workers today have chosen to abandon their membership and rather fight their battles as individuals. Over the years, members abandoned unions due to leadership infighting and the poor running of unions, plagued by greed, corruption, and mismanagement of funds. Leadership battles and factions dominated unions' agendas at the expense of workers who started feeling unheard and unseen, leading many to cancel their memberships. Quite interesting on this one element here. I represented an employer at the CCMA last year, and it so happened to be the same union who's now trying to seek organizational rights and to collectively bargain in the workplace of this company we're now talking about in today's podcast. But be that as it may, the company I represented last year, this union needed to do litigation for a large-scale retrenchments that took place at that company. Now, in terms of the LRA, the CCMA don't have the jurisdiction to arbitrate the dispute, but you still start with the conciliation process, and thereafter it must go to the labor court. The only problem is the union was 5 years late. Surprisingly, at conciliation, they applied for condemnation, and in their condemnation application, which was a massive bundle, they had, quite to their embarrassment, email trails of many years between the union officials and the employees of this trade union, which actually showed their negligence, in that specific case, the incompetence between the officials, nobody taking responsibility for what transpired at this company, where they have a lot of their members, which ultimately resulted in them literally being 5 years late. Be it as it's made, they didn't win the condemnation application. But there I had a bit of an opportunity where I could, zoom in on what's happening in that organization, and it was just like shocking. But anyway, you can also see it play out in the media now, where companies are starting to, or journalists are also starting to ask questions, but hey, what is happening here in the workplace now? What's happening in the trade union movement? You don't see so many organizing as it used to be. And it seems like there's a massive bleeding of trade union memberships. And this is what it comes down to. I suppose it's the foundation, it's at its core, it's probably, or based on this article, it's a mismanagement of funds, corruption, the union movement becoming greedy themselves, and that ultimately, I suppose, emanates into a situation where you have maybe incompetent officials, people not really focusing on members anymore. I think people have lost focus, the core reason why they exist. Leaders were accused of enriching themselves while ignoring the plight of their members and their day-to-day challenges. While many unions are credited with having played an important role in liberating workers in this country, their post-democracy links with political parties steadily started to create a conflict of interest that was not attractive to workers. They were also unable to come up with strategies to cater for rapidly changing working environments and workforces. And this is going to escalate, especially now with the AI revolution. Trade union movement, are you ready for this? Okay, that's what this article is telling me, okay, that maybe you are not ready. This lack of organization has left many workers vulnerable to the whims and unfair labor practices of employers, and has made the protection of employee rights the privilege of a few who can afford expensive labor lawyers. While celebrating Workers' Day this week, employees must be reminded that weak and ineffective unions leave employers as the sole decision makers on salaries, working conditions, and worker safety. So that is quite interesting. The trade union movement seems to have lost its track in South Africa. They are bleeding members at a massive scale at the moment. But we have to ask ourselves quickly, so we've now read the article. What is the purpose of unions in the workplace? Okay, unions are necessary to balance the scales in wage negotiations, as employers, they basically are driven by profit and not necessarily people. Okay, while some of them are patently greedy in their bid to maximize profits for their shareholders. So you need to understand this, that you have in the workplace capital on the one hand, which are the business owners, and labor on the other hand. And I suppose it's human nature that we will all most of the time look at our own interest. And if you are an employer, if you've got your own business, obviously you need to maximize profit. You also probably have shareholders, you know, who are driving profitability in the workplace on a day-to-day basis. So that is the circumstances, the context that capital operates in. But you see, this is now the thing, you know, if you have to leave workplace conditions of employment to employers only, how many of them will actually grant us paid leave? How many will actually grant us paid sick leave, parental leave, you know? Wage increases, salary increases. You know, a good thing of the trade union movement over many decades, they have bargained in the South African workspace, improved conditions, like for instance, the Basic Conditions of Employment Act we have now, where there's the provisions for overtime and normal hours of work and leave, maternity leave, family responsibility leave, so on and so forth. You know, if you're a trained staff, you have severance pay, for instance, and you have now a bit more fair labor procedures. And we mustn't lose focus of the fact that many of these benefits actually comes from the efforts of our comrades in the trade union movement, which is fantastic for employees in the workplace. So you have, in the one hand, capital, the employers who, by some of them, their own greed, will push profitability at the expense of staff. But on the other hand, what are the mechanisms available for staff to create improved conditions of employment in the workplace, but also to create increase in benefits, maybe an increase in wages? So currently, okay, you have your statutory benefits that employees have. They enjoy the basic conditions of employment, okay? There is a National Minimum Wage Act, but those are the minimum requirements for employees to really create a environment that is really beneficial for themselves. Now, this is where organizing comes in. This is now where collective bargaining comes in. This is now where trade unions come into a workplace. That sort of creates a counterbalance to the interest of employers. In principle, nothing wrong with employers having their own interest. But in this vacuum, this market where you have employers and employees, trade unions are the counterforce, if you put it this way, okay? So where employers try to maximize profits, unions will come and say, but listen, we also want a cut of it. And when we say we're talking about their members now, okay? They will also try to collectively bargain with employers so to create benefits, maybe like medical aids and provident funds and so on, okay? But okay, so for us to better understand the purpose and the place of unions in the workplace, we need to have turn a bit of a page through our law. This is the Labor Relations Act. So let's just look quickly at what are the organizational rights. So in principle, there are 5 key organizational rights that the trade union can try to exercise in a company. So you may find, if you're an HR manager at a company, at one stage you're going to find a union sending you an application for organizational rights in a company, and they will give you their certificate that they are registered with the Department of Labor. They will give you a list of the names of their members with the proof of their membership certificates, and they're going to ask you to have a meeting with them in terms of Section 21 so that the parties, as now the union and the employer, can conclude a recognition agreement. Now, a recognition agreement regulates this relationship in the workplace. A lot of employers don't want a recognition agreement, but a recognition agreement is actually a beautiful thing because this recognition agreement manages this relationship. How often do I get employers complaining about, this union just picks up when they want to and disrupt the workplace and whatever? It's because you don't have a recognition agreement in place. A recognition agreement will stipulate how often they can meet, how long the meetings will be, who they need to arrange the meeting before they come, when they can have meetings. So it regulates. It also regulates the organizational rights in the workplace, which organizational rights, and then there are termination clauses. When can this relationship with the union be terminated? It's nice to have a structured approach to this, because if not, who knows what's going on? If you don't have a recognition agreement, then you take it as it comes. No? But okay, so let's just look at the organizational rights quickly. Now, unions don't necessarily automatically qualify for all organizational rights, all 5 of them. The LRA, and we're looking here from Section 11, to up to Section 16. That is where you will find the organizational rights. Section 11 really just deals with the definition of what is a representative trade union. So that's more a bit of a definition. But from Section 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16, you'll actually find the 5 organizational rights, okay? So for those employers that say, but listen, who are unions and who gives them the right to be in my workplace? Well, the LRA provides for the right of freedom of association. So if staff wants to join a trade union, they're more than welcome to do so. Also, employers also have the freedom of association, so you can join a employer's organization. We belong to an employer's organization, and that is how we assist all our clients, the employers, in this labor relationship with employees, especially when it comes to collectively bargaining, when it comes to dispute resolution. We look after the interests of employers through the employers organization. But okay, so in terms of the definition of representation, so in terms of Section 11, a representative trade union is merely a union that is sufficiently represented. Unfortunately, the Act does not provide a percentage. Okay, so what is a sufficiently representative trade union? No one knows. Okay, I know there's this thing that people believe, if it is roughly around 20%, but it's not really about percentages. It's really about if you have to go for arbitration, for instance, to arbitrate whether a union qualifies as a sufficiently representative trade union. They will look at the circumstances of the workplace. They will look at to what extent there are other unions involved in the workplace, to what extent, can a union successfully collectively bargain inside the workplace or so. But I can safely say, they probably look at anywhere from 20 to 30%, then you become a sufficiently representative trade union. And there are 3 organizational rights that are applicable for trade unions that are only sufficiently represented. Those are Section 12, which deals with trade union access to the workplace, which means unions can come into the workplace to acquire memberships. You also have Section 13, the deduction of trade union subscriptions. So if staff join up as a member of the union, then the union can enjoy the benefit whereby the company will deduct from the salaries of the staff the union subscription fees. And the other one is Section 15, leave for trade union activities, okay? Which is those 3 rights, Section 12, Section 13, and Section 15. Now, just quickly on the leave for trade union activities. Section 15 stipulates and provides that union office bearers can enjoy this right. So a lot of employers think automatically that means shop steward. That is not the case, okay? A shop steward is not necessarily an office bearer. Now, Section 15 is only applicable to office bearers that can enjoy the right of getting some time off, for them to participate in union activities like training and conferences and whatever the case may be. Now, office bearer is like somebody who's taking up who's doing duties for the union itself. This is typically an independent person that is office-based somewhere, but okay, some unions will elect through election process that's aligned with their constitution, will actually elect shop stewards at the company to also be an office bearer. So if that is the case, then that's fine. They can also then enjoy Section 15 in principle. And then you have Section 14. These are the majority rights. So you have on the one hand sufficiently representative unions, and the other one majority. Majority is clear. Those who got 50 plus 1% representation in the workplace, they can also enjoy Section 14, which is they can elect trade union representatives. These are typically called a shop steward. And then also Section 16, the disclosure of information. So those are the 5 rights. But now a recognition agreement, okay? As I explained, the recognition agreement formalizes this relationship. So when a union applies to a company to exercise organizational rights, you have to meet with them within 30 days, the company now, to conclude this recognition agreement, okay? And I will really encourage employers, if a union are at least sufficiently representative in a company, I want to encourage you, do enter into a recognition agreement, but not blindly, obviously, because that is your opportunity to formalize this relationship and to create rules and the boundaries. Now, interesting, okay, so I want to tell you my story and then explain to you how the signing of this recognition agreement or concluding this recognition agreement really silenced the trade union in this workplace, okay? So we have this employer, they are in the retail space, and a trade union came knocking on the door, and a lot of the staff, it's quite a big space, a lot of staff, there's probably like 250 staff at this workspace, and the union are knocking on the door. They obtain membership from quite a lot of the staff. I think at some stage they were close to 50% or so, or probably just a little bit over that. But be that as it may, the company sort of allowed them to exercise all 5 organizational rights. Okay, so They then entered into a collective bargaining engagement with the company, and suddenly they wanted salary increases, the creation of benefits, provident funds, and medical aids, and you know what. And the company in that industry, in the retail industry, they are regulated by sectoral determination 9 for the wholesale and resale trade. So they are paying all the statutory requirements in terms of the sectoral determination, no issues there. But now the union want to increase the salaries way above the sectoral determination. So the company, interestingly, went through a restructuring end of last year. So obviously margins are down, so some staff were retrenched. And this was explained to the union that there's no appetite or finance to give in to the union demands. And lo and behold, the union went to the CCMA to file a mutual interest dispute. And we've already been there. And we're waiting for the picketing rules, the ruling to come out. So they want to go on a strike. But here's the thing. In the meantime, they asked for a meeting to conclude the recognition agreement, which we did honor. We had the meeting. But now, here's the thing. They sent us the recognition agreement. Their recognition agreement, they sent it to us, okay? I read through it and I was like, do these guys know what they've just sent me? Because there's some good stuff in there for us as an employer now, you see. Which created to me the impression they didn't even read their own recognition agreement. And here's the thing. If you're a shop steward in the company, don't be too overawed by the union official. Now, the union official, they're not at the company itself. They're outside, okay? But sometimes they will come there with their flashlights and whatever you see. Then they seem to be very powerful. And you as a shop steward, you feel very small and intimidated by the presence of the mighty union official. I want to speak to you, shop steward. If you're a shop steward, and your company, or your union wants to enter into a recognition agreement, read that recognition agreement. Don't just accept that the union official, because I'm telling you now, that the union officials, they are negligent. They don't read this stuff. What happens is, they are consulting and negotiating with many employers. So they've got this copy of they've got a recognition agreement in different forms already. There's different recognition agreements for different companies, because every company, they negotiate their own recognition agreements, their own terms. But what the union officials do is, they will just take one from, let's say, that company, and then they will email it to you now. So this is the one we're going to consult on here at this company. But they don't read and tailor make it first, you see. Now, so this union now sent us this recognition agreement. And interesting, let me just open this recognition agreement here so we can actually read it. Here's a clause here. Where is that clause? Here it is. Negotiations. The right to negotiate. The union shall have the right to bargain on behalf of its members in the workplace, provided that it represents 50% plus one members within the bargaining unit. The parties shall enter into the negotiations on the following issues. Then it's wages, benefits, amendments to terms and conditions of employment, which is a standard. But here's the thing. By the time they went to the CCMA, they were only standing on 38% membership. And now they give us this. Now we agreed on this. So we had a meeting. We were actually in person consulted with the union on this recognition agreement. And at no stage did they even raise this issue. Because this now means that they can't, because they're only on 38%, they can't collectively bargain for wages or for improved conditions of employment. If you can't do that, then why do you exist? So obviously, this is a copy of a recognition agreement they gave to another company. You see, maybe a big employer, where by far the majority of the staff in that company, they are indeed members of the union. But here's now a smaller company. They are trying to get an entry into this company. Here's a provision in the agreement which is detrimental to their existence, because they actually can't serve the purpose of staff now. Of course, they can serve from a dispute resolution perspective in terms of representing somebody at the hearing, for instance, and at the CCMA. That they can do. But here I'm talking about collectively bargain, you see. What's also interesting is, if I can show, and there's a recognition agreement here. termination, okay? Should the membership of the union go below 33% of the employees within the bargaining unit in the company for 1 month after the union has been given notification by the company, the relationship with the union will terminate. So that's one of the values of actually signing a recognition agreement, because now currently this union is standing on 38% and losing members, and next week both of their shop suits will be in hearings because and it's not malicious, they've been on final written warnings already, and it's a due proper process. But I'm just saying that the bleeding membership fast, okay? So what happened then? So we met with the union. They didn't raise this issue, and we said, okay, we had a bit of a timeline. Within the next 7 days, we're going to give you an updated list of all your members, so we are all on the same page. I'll get the employer to sign the recognition agreement. By a certain day, we'll give it, and then 2-3 days later, you need to sign and send your recognition agreement back. And this process happened until after the signing of the recognition agreement. I got a WhatsApp. Mr. Nell, we see there's a problem in the recognition agreement. We need to remove this clause that speaks about they can only collectively bargain if they have 50 plus membership. I told them, it's not my problem. So immediately when that picketing rules, which we are actually still waiting for, comes out, if they go on a strike, in terms of, it will make that strike immediately illegal in terms of their recognition agreement, because they do not have the right to go on a strike. They do not have the right to go on to even collectively bargain for their members because of that provision in that recognition agreement. Yeah, so when I read this article in the news, I'm just like, yes, how true is this? And I happen to be a labor law mentor or consultant for a large insurer company in South Africa. And I get this a lot, where staff will come to lawyers for assistance, but they're also members of unions. What's this thing, eh? And staff they're getting challenged now in that, they're unhappy with the service they get from the unions. And at the end of the day, look, a trade union member can open a civil lawsuit against trade unions for their negligence in the workplace and how they service their members, But yeah, you see, this is the thing, this is a message for today. If you're a shop steward, read the fine print. Actually make an effort to read documents. That if the union is trying to collectively bargain for policies, amendment to policies, you must also take a responsibility to read the policies. What is the union proposing? Recognition agreements, any other substantive agreements. Actually read the stuff. Because what happens now, as we saw here, they copy and paste these documents from other instances where they collectively bargain with other employers, and they don't actually check. Okay? Then they come here and they try to collectively bargain, and then we enter into agreements, and afterwards, what did we do? Anyway, I hope you learned something. That is this week's edition of this Chaile Time. Please remember to register for the conference. If you have not registered yet, you will find the link at the bottom. And we now have job reviews, fresh vacancies posted in our network every single week. Check it out and see you next week on this Chaile Time. Bye-bye.
Good morning, Harmony people. Let's have a look at some of the vacancies posted nationwide on our Harmony People's network this week. First up, CFAO Equipment is seeking a maintenance manager to lead and manage their Johannesburg maintenance operations with full accountability for safety, quality, cost, and delivery. Debt Switch is looking for a debt counseling professional to join their team. Intello Group is hiring a junior credit analyst. Last but not least, Truck and Plant Connection has an opening for an experienced diesel master technician. For the full information of the mentioned positions, how to apply, as well as more available positions, find the vacancy link in the description. You will also find a link to a useful video on how to compose a winning CV and have a successful interview. Tune in again next week for more Harmony vacancies.